I hate everyone who's ever told me to read this book. I gave it 5 stars. My heart gave it negative 5 stars because it was ripped into tiny pieces. Hi guys, it's Izzy, and in today's video we're going to be doing my January wrap up. It's the 1st of February and I guess England has blessed us by actually having sunlight, which is so exciting for us. I'm also wearing a Winnie the Pooh t-shirt. I dislocated my wrist so the bandage is back. My hair's not playing ball, but you know, we're just going to ignore that and we're just going to enjoy the fact that in January I read 35 books. Go me! I mean, quite a lot of them were shorter, but I did read a significant amount of books. So I feel very accomplished. The start of the year has gone well, and I'm also doing well with my 2020 TBR list. I think I read 3 of the books that were on there already this year, so I'm feeling really accomplished in my bookish life. And I read a bunch of arcs and I read a bunch of 5-star books, and it was just a really good reading month all around. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm just going to start off by talking about the Paddington series because I read 11 of those books, and yeah, I wasn't initially going to put them on Goodreads, but then I realised they're all like around 150 pages, and like most graphic novels and like novellas are like that length or shorter, so I figured it counted. And besides that, I read 24 like normal length books, so yeah, I decided to put them on there. But basically the Paddington series is a children's series, and I've just been really enjoying listening to like gentle children's books to fall asleep. I have really bad insomnia and I just like very nice calming stories to fall asleep, and Paddington did that for me. Shout out to Paddington. So yeah, I read 11 of those books. It basically follows a bear named Paddington who comes from Peru to live in London, and he is adopted by the Brown family, and he gets up to a lot of antics because he's a bear. It's not really acknowledged that it's weird that he's a talking bear. He just is a talking bear, lives his life, has a great time, is the best bear around. I just love the fact that at no point it's like, why is there a talking bear here? It's just like, fine. And I'm like, cool, I want to adopt a bear. But yeah, I read 11 of those books. I gave them all but 1 4 stars. I gave 1 3 stars because it was just a bit like meh. But overall, it's a very charming series, and if you need something very comforting and just generally very nice, I would highly recommend those books. So if you need an audiobook to listen to, hit up Paddington. I listened to a lot of audiobooks this month because half of the month I spent with migraines, so that was fun. So yeah, I did get a lot of my reading done via audiobooks this month. Shout out to audiobooks, keeping me reading. I'm now going to go in chronological order, excluding the Paddington books because I don't need to talk about them all. They're all pretty similar. He just gets to general antics and fun, and yeah, they're just nice. So the first book I read aside from that was Not a Drop to Drink by Mindy McGuinness. This is a book that takes place in a dystopian world where water is like the most sought after commodity, and we follow this girl who basically has this like pond by her house and has to protect this pond basically from anyone trying to take her water. I gave this 3 stars. I've wanted to read it for a while because I thought it would be like really thrilling and, you know, like life or death, like fighting over this water. Like I thought it was going to be like hardcore, but it turned out to not be that hardcore, to be honest, and it was a bit disappointing. Like it was a fine book, but there wasn't really much in the way of character development or like just anything character details, and there really wasn't that much plot except for like the last 10%, which was enjoyable. Like the first kind of 10% and the last 10% were enjoyable, but the rest of it was just kind of boring, so it's just very middle of the road, which is why I gave it 3 stars, because it wasn't a bad book. I was just expecting a lot more like tension and high action, and that's not what I got, unfortunately. I know this is a duology. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with it, but I do hate leaving series unfinished, so I might just to complete the series. I then reread P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. How many times have I read this book? I don't know. 20 times probably at this point. I am obsessed with this series. This is the second book in the Lara Jean series, or the To All the Boys I Loved Before series. I don't know if it actually like has a name, but I reread the whole series in preparation because the second movie is coming out on Netflix on Valentine's Day, which I'm very excited about, and I just wanted another excuse to reread the whole series, so I did. I listened to All the Boys I've Loved Before in December though, so I listened to this one in January. It was a great time. They're all 5 stars. I love them. I love Lara Jean. I love Peter Kavinsky. I am just a hoe for Jenny Han. Like, I love it, and I'm so excited for the movie. I then read an arc of Come Tumbling Down by Shannon Maguire. This is actually out now though, and this is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series, which is a series that follows a school where children go when they have basically been to a magical world and have come back. So like if Alice in Wonderland came back from Wonderland, then she would go to the school to try and like readjust to the real world and cope with being not in their like magical place that's basically made for them. And in this book we follow a character called Jack, and she lives in a place called the Moors, and yeah, I mean I don't want to give too much away if you haven't read the series, but yeah, she needs some help and to take someone down. I don't want to give any more spoilers, but I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. I think I've given all of the series 4 stars, or no, I gave 1 and 2 4 stars, and 5 4 stars, but 4 and 5 3 stars. No, 3 and 4 3 stars. Can you see I'm really on it today? But yeah, I loved this book. This was a really great entry in the series. I really loved it. I think it was so good. And if you didn't know, I am now doing full reviews of every new book I read, whether it's an arc or just a book from my shelf. So if you want to know more of my thoughts, you can follow me on Goodreads, be my friend on Goodreads, and if you want to know any more details about my thoughts on these books, then I've written a full review down below. I'll leave my Goodreads there. I won't leave every review because there's like 30 of them, so yeah, if you want to know more details on my thoughts, then check out my Goodreads. But I just loved this book. I thought the plot was so much more focused, so much more action driven. I think in the past her stories have really suffered from being kind of unfocused and kind of just a bit all over the place and lacking in action, but this had great characters, great action, a really focused and interesting plotline, and all around it was just a really, really great book. And it does have a female-female romance in it, which is always great. I then read Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. This is a horror-ish book. It's like not like really horror, but it's kind of horror. It's a YA book, and this follows a girl whose sister went missing like a year ago, I think, and Sarah, the main character, is pretty sure she knows that Becca wouldn't have just run away, whereas everyone else thinks she just kind of like ran away with a boy or just ran away, and Sarah is like convinced that Becca wouldn't do that. And so there's this rumour in the city that they live in the town that they live in, that there's this road that appears at a certain time and there are people lost on this road, and Sarah thinks that's where Becca is. So she gets together some of her old friends and they enter onto this road, which turns out to be real, and they have to pass through 7 gates, which are like each have kind of like a horror themed task. And yeah, there's death along the way, possession, all kinds of weird stuff. And I gave it 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. Horror isn't my favourite genre, and I did enjoy branching out into a different genre. Definitely kept my interest, but I just think the gates got a little bit repetitive, and at times I just kind of wanted answers, and really we only got answers like right at the end of the book, and I don't know, it just didn't really like stick with me. It was a fun read while I read it and I had a good time reading it, but I don't really remember any of the characters and I don't really remember much about it. It was just kind of a bit forgettable, and it does have a lot of good representation in here though, and there is, I don't know, do they actually get together? There's like female like crushes. I don't remember if they actually get into a relationship. See, it was forgettable, so that's why I only got 3.5 stars. But if you like horror and the plot sounds interesting to you, I would recommend picking it up. It was a good time. I then read An Arc of Only Mostly Devastated by Sophie Gonzalez, and I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. This was one of my most anticipated reads of 2020, and when I got an e-arc for it, I was so excited because I have just been, ever since I heard the premise of this book, my body has been ready. I needed it in my life. And this is a book that is basically a queer reimagining of Greece, and it was great. I mean, I feel like the Greece theme was kind of loose, but like it didn't matter. It was so good. It follows a boy who spends the summer at a different place to where he lives because his aunt is suffering from cancer, and then he has this whirlwind romance with this boy, and then he's gonna go home to where he lives, but then his parents decide that they're gonna stay in this place where he doesn't live. Sorry, I can't remember either of the places, so it's confusing, but they stay where they were because they want to help his aunt and his cousins and that kind of stuff, so they stay where they were supposed to only be for the summer, and he goes to school and he finds that this boy who he had this whirlwind romance with also goes there but isn't out and isn't really ready for a relationship, and it's just the cutest thing I've ever read. I loved it. I loved it so much. The main protagonist was brilliant. His inner monologue was so fantastic. The writing was so relevant and relatable without it feeling like Sophie Gonzalez was trying too hard when writing it. Like, it felt really natural and really like how teenagers act and speak. The romance was beautiful and heartbreaking and cute and lovely, and there was really interesting talk around grief and illness and that kind of stuff, and it was just all done so well. It was funny, it was heartwarming, it was heartbreaking. I just felt every emotion while reading it, and honestly, like, it was compared to Love, Simon, and I feel like a lot of queer books are just like compared to Love, Simon because they're queer, and like that's the most popular book, so publishers just compare it to that so people pick it up. But this book really is the closest thing I think I've read to Love, Simon, or Simon versus the Homo sapien agenda. It's easier to say Love, Simon. So if you are craving something similar to that book, then you should absolutely pick this up. This also has great representation, and it has gay representation, bi representation, female representation, like pretty much like black representation, Latino representation. It just has everything basically. It has it all. It's great. Pick it up. It comes out March 5th and you will not be disappointed. Pick it up. Pick it up. I then read Stepsister by Jennifer Donnelly. This is a book that follows Cinderella's stepsisters after Cinderella gets her happy ending, and we follow one of the sisters, Isabel, as she is kind of stuck with this brand of bullying Ella, and she has a wish to be pretty. All she wants is to be pretty so that like people will finally like her and boys will want to date her and that kind of stuff. And so the fairy godmother makes her look for the 3 pieces of her heart, and then she will get a wish. And so that's what she does, and she kind of puts herself back together and tries to learn the error of her ways and just how to be a better person and a person more confident in herself and her abilities. And I really love the feminist themes of this book. I think it was fantastically written in terms of a feminist piece of literature. I did find it a little bit boring, especially like the middle part. It kind of got a bit bogged down, and it is, yeah, it's like 450 pages, which is just too long. It could have been cut down by like 100 pages and it would have been like a 4 or 5 stars for me, but as it is, I gave this 3 stars because I just didn't like super connect with it enough to dedicate 450 pages to it. I then read Always and Forever Lara Jean by Jenny Han. I forgot, I didn't actually explain what this series was about. This series follows Lara Jean, who has loved 5 boys in her life, and after every time she's like gotten over a boy, she writes a letter like saying all the things she would like to say to them, and then puts it in a box, and like kind of that's like her last feelings, and then once she's written that letter she can like move on with her life. But then one day her letters get sent out somehow and she is forced to start fake dating one of these boys in order to save face in front of another boy, and it's so good. And this is the 3rd and final book in the series. Won't say what this one's specifically about because I mean spoilers, I don't know. It just follows Lara Jean's life and I love it very much. 5 stars. I love this series so very much. I then read The Library of Lost Things by Laura Taylor Namey, and I gave this book 2 stars. I really didn't enjoy it, unfortunately. This book follows a character whose mum is a hoarder, and she kind of like tries to hide her apartment from anyone, but especially like the landlords, so that they still have a place to live. And she has to kind of deal with the fact that her mum won't stop buying things, and she has to be such a responsible person at a young age, and she kind of has to provide money and support and keep the landlords away and all that kind of stuff. And she also has basically a photographic memory and can quote like every book she's ever read. It's kind of weird. And yeah, and then she falls for this boy who's dating someone else, and it's just, you know, teenage life. And I gave this book 2 stars because I just thought it was really boring. I thought the main character was obnoxious. I thought that I didn't feel connected to any of the characters. I didn't really care about the romance. I didn't really care about anything. I did like the representation, and I did appreciate that although the main character had frustrations with her mother, as of course she would, it wasn't necessarily demonized, and the kind of promotion was of like therapy and treatment to, rather than just like, oh, you need to get over your like hoarding and OCD and that kind of stuff. So I appreciated that. And also the love interest had a disability. He had post-concussion syndrome and also had a limp. Post-concussion syndrome was from an accident, and he like can't like remember stuff, and he like gets headaches and dizzy. And I really appreciated the fact that there was a love interest who was disabled, but at no point did that make him unlovable. And yeah, I just really appreciated seeing a love interest disabled, because so often people who are disabled are seen as like unlovable and kind of, you know, unless they get better they can't be with them, and I'm just really sick of that as a disabled person. So it was really nice to see. That's kind of what got it up for 1 star. Apart from that, I just didn't like this book, but I really did appreciate the disabled representation. I then read, I can't even believe I'm gonna say this, I then read King of Crows by Libba Bray. I got it like just under a month early, and when I say when I got that acceptance I started crying, I'm not even lying. I literally was like shaking. Like this is my favourite series of all time, and this was the conclusion to my favourite series of all time. I'm filming this on February 1st. The book comes out February 4th. I'd already pre-ordered it months ago, so I will be getting the physical book soon, in 3 days time. And it was amazing. I gave it 5 stars. I wrote a really long review down below, kind of looking at all my feelings. If you've read the first 3 books, if you haven't read the series at all, probably don't read that review. But I just can't even tell you all my thoughts right now. It took me so long to write that review because I just couldn't even get my thoughts into a coherent post. But I'm really proud of that review, so I'd really appreciate it if you checked it out. And yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of sad that I got an e-arc of it because that meant I have no one to discuss it with, and it's tragic. This is my favourite series of all time, and it's a historical fiction fantasy book where basically it follows a group of teenagers living in the roaring 20s in New York City who have powers such as like they can walk in dreams, they can heal people, they can like touch objects and like learn about people's lives. They can do all sorts of stuff, and they kind of have to come together to fight this like evil like demon thing, and that's the like overall plot for the 4 books, but there are kind of like separate plots in each book, but the 4th plot is kind of, you know, covering all bases. And I literally can't even talk about it because I literally will start crying. I cried for like almost 200, like 150 pages. I was just like sobbing. Like my family was so concerned. They were like, oh my god, you need to stop crying. But I just cried for like 2 hours straight. It was a great time. Am I empty now that it's finished? Now that I'm never gonna get new words from my favourite characters? Yes. Am I having a midlife crisis about it? Yes. Am I ever gonna be okay again? No. Has this just been minutes of me making no sense at all and just rambling about the fact my favourite series has ended and I've read it and I don't know what to do with my life now? Yes. If you want any sort of coherent thoughts, read my review. It's detailed, but there's no spoilers for the 4th book. It's spoiler free if you've read the first 3 books. Anyway, we're gonna have to move on because I'm gonna have another mental breakdown. We can't talk about this for too long. I then read another arc, and that was The Henna Wars by Adiba Jaigerda. I hope that's similar to how it's supposed to be pronounced. And this is a book that follows 2 girls who kind of are interested in each other, but then their school makes them do this like business project where they have to set up a business and run a business, and then they get like a prize at the end of it for the person who like made the most money or something, I don't remember. And they both decide to do a henna business, and the main character is Bengali, so that is part of her culture, whereas the love interest is Brazilian, and so that's not part of her culture. And our main character tries to explain to her that that's like cultural appropriation, but the love interest doesn't really want to hear it, and so it follows her as she's kind of connecting more with her culture, and she comes out to her parents as lesbian, which doesn't go down well. And yeah, we just follow her and this kind of enemies to lovers romance and her processing coming out and it not going well, etc, etc. And I gave this book 4 stars. I was hoping it was going to be 5 stars, but for me there was just too much triggering content for homophobia, bullying, unconsented coming outs, and yeah, it was just a lot, and I expected it to be more like fluffy and kind of just a lighter contemporary than it was, which like isn't really a critique of the book, like that's on me I guess, like I just didn't know that going in, and yeah, that just makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But I think it was a really good book. It was such good writing for a debut novel. It was really great female content. It was really great to learn more about Bengali and Brazilian culture, and it was really great to see a more diverse queer novel. And yeah, it was a really good book, a really great debut. Just beware if you are queer that it is quite triggering, so just make sure you're in a headspace where you can handle that. I then read Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I rounded it up to 4 on Goodreads. This is a thriller mystery kind of thing. I didn't read Karen McManus's first book because I just knew there were tropes in there that I would not enjoy, and I would probably end up giving it 1 star just based on how it ended, I knew how it ended because I'd seen some rant reviews and I just knew I wouldn't enjoy it, so I didn't bother reading it. I decided to pick this book up because I wanted to see what her writing was like and, you know, enjoy a book that has less problematic content, and I really enjoyed this book. This is a book that follows twins as they go to their mother's hometown to stay with their grandma because their mother is gone into rehab, and basically there's been 2 murders in the town. One was their mum's sister when she was homecoming queen, and one was like 3 years ago and was also the homecoming queen. And so they start going to school there and start making friends, and slowly they're getting more threats and the girls are kind of being targeted, and there's just a lot of shady stuff going on. And yeah, another girl gets killed, I think, yes, I'm pretty sure another girl gets killed. Yes, she does. And yeah, it was just a really fun thriller mystery. I really liked the pacing of it. I thought it was just a really engaging read. I thought the ending was good. I mean, I didn't guess it, and I don't think that's because I didn't pick up on the clues. I think it was just so out of left field that there really was no way for you to guess the ending, but at least I was surprised, and it wasn't an ending that like didn't make any sense. It like you could see it now, like yeah, that made sense, but there wasn't really any clues for it, if you get what I mean. But I liked the ending. I like to be surprised. It doesn't happen often, and really the only thing I didn't like was the romance, and just the characters were a bit bland, but it was a pleasant surprise. And I've really not had much luck with thrillers in the last year, and so it was really nice to find one that I actually relatively enjoyed. I then read An Arc of Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I know it's actually been out in the US for like 6 or 7 months, but it's coming out in the UK in February, which is why I could get an ARC for it, because it hasn't been published in England yet. And I gave this book 3 stars. I enjoyed this book. This was kind of a sci-fi horror weird mix, and it basically follows these girls who went to an all-girls school on this like island, and they've been put into quarantine because there's something called the tox that has infected them all, and they can't like leave this school and no one can come to this school. And basically what the tox does is kind of deforms each girl's body in a different way and can also kill them. So like our main character, her eye is like sealed shut and she's like growing a 3rd eyelid, and like one of them has an extra spine, and like one of them has a weird lizard hand. It's kind of weird and creepy. But yeah, we follow these 3 girls as they kind of try and find out what's going on, what's being covered up, how they're going to escape. And yeah, it was a fun and engaging read, but again, it just wasn't that memorable. I know it's not going to stick with me, and it just wasn't like incredible. The story was really engaging, the plot was really engaging. I actually really liked the ending. I know some people didn't, but I thought it ended really well, and yeah, I had a good time reading it. But for me, it wasn't like a super standout book. Again, this does have a female romance. I read a lot of queer books this month and it was great. They were all really great queer romances, so that was fun. I then buddy read The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn with Jamie from Leo Reads, and we both hated it. I gave it 1 star, so did she. It was terrible. Again, I wrote a review for this. I don't want to go into too much detail because I just hate it so much and I never want to talk about it again. But it basically follows a woman named Anna who has agoraphobia after something happened to her, and she basically witnesses a murder from her window, but no one believes her, and she's an alcoholic, and she is kind of being gaslit basically and made to think that what she's seen isn't real. And it was just terrible. The mental health representation was awful. There was so much demonizing, and it was written by a man, and it was so sexist and just not great, and I just hated everything about it. And also it took 35% of this 440-page book for the murder to happen. So I had to read 150 pages of nothing. If you want to know more details, read my review, but I hated it. In summary, it sucks. Don't read it. I have no idea why it got so much hype. I'm gonna be unhauling it after this video because I hate it so damn much. Like, I hate it with a burning passion. I hate it so very much. I honestly kind of want to do a whole video of a rant review about it, but you know what? I don't even want to put myself through that, so we're not going to. I then got an e-arc of What Kind of Girl by Alyssa B. Scheinmel, and I DNF'd this at 50%. I don't usually count books I DNF on Goodreads unless I've read 50% or more of it. Then I feel like I've read a significant chunk of a book, so I count it as reading the book. And this wasn't a bad book, it was just not good. It follows a incident where a girl has been hit by her boyfriend and she reports it to the principal of her school, and it kind of follows like this, how the school reacts, how the girl's life changes, you know, what the boys say, all that kind of stuff, what her parents say, you know, just like everything that comes along with women not being believed. And I thought I was really gonna love this book because I love books that tackle difficult topics like that, and so I thought it was going to be a real win for me. But my main problem was it follows multiple perspectives, and it was so repetitive. Usually when you follow multiple perspectives, you don't get the same scenes from both sides. You usually get different scenes from people, like you don't just get the same scene over and over again. And this book was just so repetitive, and I just wasn't in the headspace where I wanted to continue with it because I was bored and it was repetitive and I just was not enjoying myself in any way, shape or form. And so yeah, it was just really disappointing, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to love this book, but it just really didn't work for me. I then read The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson. This is the third and final book in the Truly Devious series, and I thought it was a satisfying ending. I gave it 3.5 stars. I didn't like the first book, I quite enjoyed the second book, and this book was just sort of okay. This book follows a girl called Stevie who goes to this school called Ellingham Academy, and basically it's like a school for like prodigies in specialist subjects, and she loves true crime and decides that she's gonna solve a murder / kidnapping that happened in like the 1930s at Ellingham Academy, and then people start dying in the current day, so we're kind of following two different timelines. She's trying to solve all these murders, and it was a satisfying conclusion, but it was pretty boring. And just overall, I just think if this series was just one book that was like 500 pages, it would have been a 5-star for me. I would have loved it, but it was just not worth reading 3 over 300 page books. It was just painful. Nothing happened in the first book except setting up the murder, and it was just so pointless, and it just didn't even need to exist. Like, the second and third book could have just been put together, and yeah, just most of it could have been cut and it could have been one book and it would have been so much better. It just wasn't, it just was not worth 3 books. I don't think that mystery should be dragged out after one book. I just think a mystery or a thriller should be started and solved in one book. But that's just me. I know a lot of people love this series, but I think it was a pretty satisfying conclusion. I then died because I read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I hate everyone who's ever told me to read this book. I gave it 5 stars. My heart gave it -5 stars because it was ripped into tiny pieces. Why would you do this to me? Why would anyone do this to me? Who thought this was a good idea? No, I can't handle it. It was too much. No, again, very hard to write a review for, but I did write a detailed review on it, so check it out if you want to. Sorry, can my family not keep it down? Anyway, this is a retelling, reimagining of the story of Achilles and Patroclus, and yeah, we basically follow them through their lives and the Trojan War and all that kind of stuff, and their love and devotion to each other. and it broke my heart into a million pieces, and I will never recover. I cried a lot. So yeah, I have nothing more to say except it was the most stunning book I've probably ever read. Not ever, because that goes to the Starless Sea, but it's definitely top 3 of, it was just stunning. Read at your own risk though. Get yourself some tissues, people, you're gonna need them. I then read The Railway Children by E. Nesbit. Again, this is a book I listened to at night because I just wanted something calm and gentle. To be honest, it doesn't really have much of a plot. It basically just follows these 3 children who move to the countryside where there's this railway, and they just kind of go about their lives. What is the plot of The Railway Children? There really is not a plot. I don't even know how to like pitch it, because it's just children doing children stuff, and their dad has like gone away for some unknown reason. That's like the only bit of plot we get. It was a fine read. I gave it 3 stars. It was nice, it was gentle, it was charming, but it was really a bit nothingy. Like I don't really know what the point of it was, but it was nice. It was nice. I haven't written a review for it yet because I don't really have a whole lot to say. I don't know if I'm going to write a review for it. Unsure. Then I read The City of Ember by Jeanne Dupro? No idea. And this is a book that's also kind of a dystopian book, and it's basically set in this town which is powered by like electricity and light, and they basically don't have a sky. They have no light aside from like light bulbs, and so they live in this town that basically relies on electricity and light bulbs, and they start getting more and more blackouts, which is making the town very scared. And we follow our main character who finds this kind of ripped up note and starts to put together clues on how to kind of save the City of Ember and like save the people of the City of Ember. And it was a fun time. I had a good time reading it. Again, it just wasn't anything special. I don't think I'll continue on with the series because I think it just gets worse, and I just had a good time reading it. It was a fun time, but it just, again, wasn't anything special. But if that premise sounds interesting to you, I wouldn't discourage you from reading it. It was a fun time. It just wasn't magical or anything. I think it's middle grade because the main character's like, I think she's like 12 or 13, so it is a bit younger, but it was still a relatively enjoyable read. I then read The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. This is a book that is kind of sci-fi. Basically, Earth has moved to another planet. I don't know, I guess Earth was uninhabitable, and we follow our main character Todd, who lives in this place called Prentice Town, which only has men in it, and they can hear each other's thoughts. It's called The Noise, and basically men and women can hear what men are thinking, but women don't have the noise. And basically all the women in Prentice Town died from the same thing that gave the men the noise. And yeah, we start off this book with Todd being told he needs to go on the run because the men of Prentice Town are going to be after him, and he is the last one to become a man because he has not yet turned 13, and he just knows something bad happens when you become a man. And so his parents send him away, and he meets this girl who is like lost her parents, and they basically go on the run. And it's a pretty long book. It's just under 500 pages. I've got the cool sprayed edges version. I love it. And I gave this book 3.5 stars. It was a good time. It was an exciting and engaging read, but again, it wasn't that memorable and it didn't really stand out to me. So it was just like kind of, I will continue with the series 100% because from what I can see on Goodreads it only gets better, and I have the whole series. So yeah, it was an encouraging start to the series and definitely piqued my interest, but it just wasn't a standout. So 3.5 stars. I could maybe round it up to a 4. It definitely was a good goodish book, and if you haven't read it, I would say go for it. I also reread, for some reason it's not coming up on my Goodreads, I also reread Skyward by Brandon Sanderson in preparation to read Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, the second book, which I've just started, and I'm very excited because this was my third favourite book of 2019. I love it very much. It's a chunky book. It's like, how long are you, sir? It's just over 500 pages. It's incredible. I love it so much, and yeah, I reread it in preparation for the second book because I read it in like January or February of 2019, so I wanted to make sure I was ready to go for Starsight. I don't know at which point I read that because it's not coming up on my Goodreads, but I read it. I also read The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. This is technically the 6th book in the Chronicles of Narnia, but it should be read as the first book because it's like a prequel. I don't even know what it's about. It's basically about how Narnia came to be. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars, but I think that might have been a bit generous. It was just kind of very bland. I'm also going to talk about the fact that I read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, so the first book in the Chronicles of Narnia. And I also gave this 3 stars, but honestly it might have been more of a 2.5 stars. I remember really liking the movie for this. I'm pretty sure I read the book at the time, but I've read so many more middle grade books since then, and they're just so much better than this was. Like, for instance, the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend, which is one of my favourite series of all time, but it is a middle grade series, and the heart and the detail and the whimsy and the magicalness of that series is so deep and engaging, and the most fun book you could ever read. And this book was just bland. You don't really get to know anything about the characters. The writing is very dry, and I just didn't feel transported in any way, shape or form. I didn't feel like I was in Narnia. I didn't feel like I was part of the events. I just felt very removed from it, which I was quite surprised because I thought I would have a good time reading it. I never continued on with the series, so I will be reading the rest of the series, but it was a little bit of a disappointment because I just didn't feel connected at all. And also shout out to Edmund for being the worst little brother in the world. I look great as a younger sibling compared to Edmund, who betrayed his family for some Turkish delight. We stan an icon. I then read an e-arc of Diary of a Confused Feminist by Kate Weston, which is coming out next week, I believe, and this book was brilliant. I gave it 4.5/5 stars. It was incredible. I highly recommend you pick it up. I haven't written my full review for it yet, but it will probably be up to either today or tomorrow. I don't know when this video is going up, but I'm hoping it will be up before this video goes up. And this book was just fabulous. It follows our main character Kat, who is trying to be a good feminist at age 15. She's trying to work out what that means for her. She also starts suffering from some anxiety and depression, and she goes to therapy for it, which was so good to see. Like, you just never see therapy in books. Like, there's talk of it, but you never really see a character actually going to therapy. And as someone who's gone to therapy for like the last 9 years for like anxiety and panic attacks and depression, etc, etc, it was just really refreshing to see a character actually do what I do. And yeah, it was just really, really nice. And this book was pitched as being hilarious, and I'm not sure I've ever laughed out loud at a book. Like, I've maybe laughed out loud at a book like once and I laughed out loud at this book like 15 or 20 times. It was hilarious, like genuinely hilarious, and this is coming from someone who has never laughed out loud at a book. I maybe do a little bit of a little sigh, but I've never like actually physically laughed, and this book was just hilarious. It was so relatable, it was so fun, and I'm just so glad it exists for children, not children, but like girls who are like 15 to 16. I just think this is the perfect book, and I'm just so glad it exists and has been written, and I just can't wait for girls to read it and to feel like seen and connected to this book, as I did even at 20. And yeah, it was just fabulous. And if you like anger songs and perfect snogging, either the series or the movie, you're gonna love this book. It gave me serious vibes of that. So you're gonna love it. And then the final book I read was Howls Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I gave this book 3 stars. I really expected to love it more than I did, but I just found it quite boring. It takes place in this just kind of vague magical land, and it follows our main character Sophie, who gets cursed by a witch to become old. She becomes 90 years old, and so she doesn't really know what to do, so she goes to this wizard called Howl, who is kind of she's been told that he's evil, but she thinks he might be able to break the curse, so she goes to live with him and makes a deal with this demon that they'll break each other's curses, and basically they just live in this castle that moves and has different doors and stuff, and really not a lot happens. It was rather charming, it was nice, but I just got really bored. So yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment. I know it's a classic in America. I'd never heard of it before BookTube, and I'm glad I finally read it just to see what it was about, but it was a bit disappointing, unfortunately. But maybe it was just too hyped up. Maybe that was the problem. I don't know. But yeah, sorry this has been a bit all over the place. I read a lot of books, I had a lot of thoughts about them, and yeah, I mean, what I would take away from this video is you should read Diary of a Confused Feminist, Song of Achilles if you want to be murdered, you should read King of Crows, obviously, and you should also read Only Mostly Devastated when it comes out. They were all absolutely fabulous. So yes, sorry this video is so long. I had a lot of books to review. I apologise. I'll try and make this as short as I can with editing. Thanks editing. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below what your favourite book of January was, whether you're excited for any of these new releases. Oh, and I forgot to say the Henna Wars comes out in May. Buy it then. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm not sure what my next video is going to be. If there's any videos that you really want me to do, please leave some requests down below. Follow me on Goodreads, be my friend on Goodreads, because I'm really active on there now, and like I said, I'm writing reviews of all the books I'm reading. And follow me on Twitter, and yeah, I'd just love to see you around. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!